Welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Archana Solanki. Here are the headlines we're tracking this hour. Market regulator SEBI requests the Supreme Court to give it a 6-month extension to complete its investigation into allegations made by Hindenburg against the Adani Group. Says it has not reached any conclusion yet, but prima facie investigations have identified 12 possibly suspicious transactions that will need to be rigorously investigated. Adds the complex nature of transactions will need data and analysis from various sources, including depositions from key management personnel in the Adani Group. The Enforcement Directorate conducts search and seizure operations at 2 office premises belonging to the EdTech giant Byjus and 1 residence connected to founder Ravindran Byju in a FEMA violation case. Says it has seized incriminating documents and data pertaining to 28,000 crore rupees received as FDI by the company between 2011 and 2023 and foreign remittances of 9,700 crore rupees. Adds that Ravindran failed to respond to several summons. Byjus calls the ED action routine, says it's business as usual at the company. Wrestlers' protest at Delhi's Jantar Mantar continues even as Delhi police files 2 FIRs against Federation Chief Byju Singh. Wrestlers want Singh to be arrested. Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal and Congress leader Priyanka Gandhi Vadra visit Jantar Mantar, extend support to the wrestlers. All right, the top story that we are tracking tonight. Market regulator SEBI has sought a 6-month extension from the Supreme Court to complete investigations into allegations made by the Hindenburg report against the Adani Group. SEBI said that it has not reached any conclusion yet, but prima facie investigations have identified 12 possibly suspicious transactions that will need to be rigorously investigated. My colleague Ashmit Kumar, who's been tracking this case very closely, joins us on the broadcast. Ashmit, SEBI was supposed to submit the status report to the Supreme Court on May 2nd, but right ahead of the deadline, the market regulator has sought a 6-month extension. For the benefit of our viewers, could you help us understand why this extension has been sought?
Well, before we go into the why, just to give our viewers a brief insight as to the substance of this affidavit. As far as the affidavit itself is concerned, as you were correctly pointing out, SEBI has in fact gone through the evidence available and has identified 12 transactions which in fact are suspicious in nature and need to be probed. And towards that end, SEBI affidavit says that there's a prima facie view to check for possible violations of disclosure norms, possible violations of corporate governance norms, possible violations of minimum public shareholding norms, as well as possible violations of stock price in terms of stock price manipulation. This is, of course, as far as the Hindenburg report is concerned, but not just that. SEBI affidavit also says that to check for the trading action that took place before the Hindenburg report and after the Hindenburg report, there is a prima facie need felt by the market regulator to check for possible violations of FPI norms, possible violations of ODI norms, possible violations of insider trading regulations, as well as to check whether or not there was any violation of short selling norms. So on the back of all of this, what SEBI says is that rigorous investigations are required, that similarly placed investigations, when done in the US, the SEC there can take 50-odd months to complete the investigation. SEBI then says that even in our situation, an investigation of this nature, the wide scope that has been spelled out, the various violations, possible violations that need to be checked, SEBI says even in our situation, it could very easily, in the normal course of investigations, take about 15 months. But we're trying to put our best foot forward. We're trying to complete the investigation. The time that they've sought is 6 months. They've sought a 6-month extension. This, of course, question being raised by the market regulator. The apex court will, of course, have the final say on whether or not they get that extension and whether or not the Supreme Court has to say anything about this affidavit filed by the market regulator.
Right. Ashmit, if you could help us refresh the memories of our viewers, which are the Adani entities on radar and what about the leadership of the Adani Group companies? What kind of information is the market regulator seeking as far as the allegations are concerned?
Well, it's important to red flag as far as this affidavit is concerned. It importantly points out that there are 7 entities of the Adani Group, which in fact will be looked at, which will be investigated. The 7 listed entities are Adani Enterprises, Adani Power, Adani Transmission, Adani Green Energy, Adani Ports and SEZ, Adani Total Gas, as well as Adani Wilmar. These are the 7 listed entities which SEBI says will need to be investigated in lieu of these suspicious transactions. Not just that, SEBI also says that not just these companies, but also their subsidiaries as well as step-down subsidiaries could also fall on the radar. SEBI further goes on to say that investigations may also require depositions to be given by key management personnel as well as by the auditor. So that's SEBI spelling out the wide scope of investigations that could cover not just the companies, also their subsidiaries, as well as the auditors and also possibly key management personnel.
Right, Ashmit, all eyes are on the market regulator. But any word on the Supreme Court constituted expert panel?
Well, let's not forget that even the Supreme Court expert committee had been granted 2 months' time. So even their deadline is due to run out shortly. May 3rd is when they're expected to give the report, at least as per the earlier Supreme Court order, as per their findings and their oversight into the matter. Now, what's important to point out is that SEBI, as a part of its affidavit, says that they have shared their prima facie views with the expert committee, that there were 2 meetings called between the market regulator and the expert committee. And in these 2 meetings, SEBI had shared voluminous data, extensive data, supporting notes, and had in fact shared its views with this expert committee. What's important is that the expert committee had been granted this 2-month window and had been asked to file its report in a sealed cover before the apex court. Now, that deadline is yet to be reached, but we're only a few days away now. So all eyes now, other than the market regulator, also on the expert committee on whether or not they meet this deadline or whether they seek the extension. And if they do meet the deadline, then what could be the nature of the findings? There's a big question mark because the Supreme Court says that these findings will be in a sealed cover. So the next week will be critical here, and not just to understand the market regulator's stance before the top court, but also the expert committee on whether or not they meet that deadline or seek an extension. And finally, of course, the final word will be had by the apex court on what direction it chooses to give to the Adani Hindenburg saga and the various petitioners who have lined up before the top court.
All right. Thank you, Ashmit, for getting us the big headline of the day. Moving on to the other big story that we are tracking. The Enforcement Directorate conducted search operations at 2 premises belonging to EdTech major Byjus and at the residence of CEO Byju Ravindran over FEMA violations. Byjus claims it was a routine exercise and it is business as usual at the company. For more on this, I'm joined by Parikshit Luthra on the broadcast. Parikshit, this is a massive development as far as Byjus is concerned. What can you tell us about the search and the nature of allegations?
Yes, that's right. The Enforcement Directorate is investigating violations of foreign funding laws by online education portal Byjus and its founder Ravindran Byju. The Enforcement Directorate has carried out searches at 3 locations in Bengaluru, 2 official premises and 1 residence connected to Ravindran Byju and the Byju's company as well. So what is the Enforcement Directorate actually looking at? After these searches were carried out, the Enforcement Directorate has said that a large number of incriminating documents and data has been discovered, which will now be verified. They are looking at the foreign direct investment to the tune of 28,000 crores, which has been received by Byju's company from 2011 to 2023. They're also looking at 9,754 crores, which has been invested abroad as overseas investment by Byju's, and 944 crores in the company's books, which has been marked as marketing and advertisement expenses. The ED has also noted that the company has not prepared financial statements since 2020, and it has not got its accounts audits done, which is mandatory, and therefore the genuineness of figures provided by the company is being verified. They also said that Ravindran Byju, the CEO and founder of the company, has been summoned for questioning a number of times, but he remains evasive and he's not bailed for questioning.
Right. Thank you, Parikshit, for getting us those updates. Meanwhile, these searches also indicate a wave of change for startups. My colleague Ritu Singh, who closely tracks the startup space, is joining us on the broadcast. Ritu, it is a very significant development. For the benefit of our viewers, could you help us understand what kind of impact is this going to have on the startup space?
Well, before I get to the wider impact for Byjus itself, now, in response to the ED searches that took place today, Byjus in its statement to us said it is business as usual for Byjus and that nothing really gets impacted. They called it a routine nature of inquiry by the ED with regards to the FEMA, rules as far as those are concerned, and that they're confident in the integrity of their operations. They're cooperating with the authorities and are hopeful of an early resolution in the matter. But that said, these ED searches are actually coming at a very critical time because, as my colleague Shruti had reported earlier, the company is in the process of trying to raise a critical funding of about $200 to $500 million. Now, why does it need these funds? One, the company is trying to cut costs, turn profitable, and also because there have been reports that there have been pressure on the company to repay about $1.2 billion of term loans it raised, at least partially, that it raised in 2021. And that is because lenders have been concerned about the delays in the company filing its financial results for FY21-22, and now, of course, we're completed FY23 as well. And therefore, there were also talks about Byjus trying to refinance its loans at a higher price, even at a higher price to do so, at a similar valuation of $22 billion that the company was last valued at. Remember, this may also impact the company's attempt to take its brand Akash public, which it has received a board nod for, and it is in the process of finalizing bankers for to be able to take the company public. So we'll have to see how all of this plays out for the company. Given that it is such a large company, one of the largest edtech companies in the world, like I said, valued at $22 billion, these kind of searches are bound to have some impact. As far as the investor community is concerned, we'll have to see how they take it, whether it impacts sentiments, whether they turn more risk-averse or more cautious. But actually, to understand that, I am now joined by an industry veteran, Mohandas Pai, who is the chairman of RN Capital as well. Mr. Pai, thank you very much for your time here on CNBC-TV18. You heard what my colleague Pariksha just told us about the ED searches. And of course, as I explained, this is coming at a critical time for the company as well. How do you think this impacts investor sentiment at a time when already there are enough and more macro headwinds?
Well, this is a private company, so you're not going to see an immediate impact because Byju will have to talk to his major investors, communicate with them, show them the notices, and respond to the ED inquiry. Obviously, if you're a listed company, the impact will be immediate. There'll be some fear in the marketplace. But being a private company, you'll have to do all this. But the key issue that all these big startups should do is they must file their accounts on time. They must get their accounts audited. They must maintain all their records. They must respond to regulators who come and ask them for information. Because under the law, regulators have the right to ask for information, and people must respond. I think that governance will be a bigger concern for investors, because all this is a function of governance. I do wish Byju, as the largest startup in this country in terms of valuation, improves governance, brings in better practices, completes the audit. And what saddens me is most of the listed startups delay their announcement of their quarterly results. All the big unicorns who listed, how many of them announced results? Your HDFC, Infosys, Reliance announced results. They must set standard. It seems to be a cultural issue with all these people.
Yeah. Sure. The fact of the matter is the results have been delayed for more than 2 years, Mr. Pai. But more importantly, you said it's not a public company and therefore there's no public impact. But it is there are 70 investors in the company. Wouldn't it have a ripple effect as far as investor sentiment is concerned? Such a large company, all of 2022. Yes.
Ritu see, when you have private investors, you'll get on a call and explain everything to them, right? And you'll do it immediately. I'm sure Byju will get on a call and say that the ED has come. They've asked for all this information. We're in the process of giving it, and we will keep you appraised every week and fulfill it. And investors will do the due diligence, because most institutional investors understand these things happen. So that I'm not worried about that. I'm worried whether there is anything behind the ED's findings. Obviously, I do hope, and I'm sure Byju would have complied with the law and all that. So I think it's an important thing for Byju to prove and to provide documentation to investors that they abided the law and they have done everything which is right. And I'm sure he would have done that because to take money out of this country and to invest, you have to go through the banking channels, and the banks ask for a lot of information, and I'm sure the banks would have done full due diligence. So, but I think the important thing is Byju, by delaying the accounts and delaying the release, laid themselves open to this kind of action. Because if you're a very large company, you don't file your accounts, you delay your audit, it creates suspicions about your accounts. And regulators will step in, right? If you're a listed company, imagine the action. SEBI would immediately acted, right?
I understand, Mr. Pai. I understand, Mr. Pai, but my question was, given that it is such a large company, and this is not the first hint of trouble at the company, if not in the larger ecosystem, at least for the investors that are invested in the edtech companies, will it not make them question their decisions? Will it not make them more risk averse in this moment, when these kind of things are coming to light?
No, it will make them more risk averse in the sense they'll focus more on governance. Because they will be on the board, they will insist that the accounts are audited, accounts are released immediately, adequate information flow is there. I mean, I would blame the board too, right? Please remember, they are investors on Byju's board. What are they doing sitting on the board? Why they're not making sure the accounts are audited, accounts are released in time? They're also party to it, right? Because whenever large investors come, they have board rights. They have an agreement. And everything that the company does is subject to their approval. Budgets are subject to their approval. Capital spending is subject to approval. Acquisitions have to go through the board. Everything would have gone through the board. That means all major investment decisions would have been approved by the board, and they're all party to it. So since they're a party to it, anything like this happening, Byju will have to communicate, and the board has possibly to set up a committee to work with management to handle this to make sure the company remains kosher and goes on. You see, it's very different in a private company, Ritu. Yes, will new investors be very cautious and more cautious coming in? Yes. Will investors already in become more cautious and try to improve governance? Hope so. I think they should do it. But Ritu, we have a bigger issue in India.
A more positive outcome to come out of this.
Ritu, we have a bigger issue in India which I want to raise. I do wish regulatory agencies like the CBI, Income Tax and ED stop giving public releases whenever they ask for information or go visit people's places. They must visit or conduct these so-called raids only at the last resort in case they don't give information, and they must not do it immediately and not issue press releases, we went there. Because once you issue a press release, you have to make a statement. We searched, we found incriminating documents, we found this, we found this. They have to do that to justify the search, right? I wish they don't do that. And let them search, let them go, follow the law, and then if they find anything, file a charge sheet, and that can be made public. I think in India today, there are too many of these things happening where decent businesses' reputation could get tarnished. Because in the eyes of the Indian public, CBI visiting or income tax visiting and ED visiting is not a good thing. People think you've done something wrong immediately. It gets a negative image. It is not good for the country itself. So I hope government will listen and change the process. Nobody's saying don't follow the law, don't enforce the law. Please do that. But do it in an unoppressive manner so they don't give undue publicity unless you have data and you file a charge sheet.
Well, that's a larger debate for another time, Mr. Pai, but thank you very much for your time here. We understand, of course, the ED allegation, it is not a charge sheet yet. These are just initial findings. We'll have to see how the case evolves, but thank you very much for your time and for explaining how this could potentially impact the startup community and how investors would perhaps focus more on governance here onwards. Thank you very much, Mr. Pai, and Archana, on that note, it's back to you.
Right, thank you, Ritu, for that conversation. It's time for a short break, but coming up next, unseasonal rains and hailstorms damaged a huge portion of this year's Rabi crop. A special report on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Unseasonal rains and hailstorms have damaged a sizable portion of this year's Rabi crop. Farmers in Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Punjab, Haryana and Rajasthan have been affected the most. As part of our ongoing series, What's Ailing Rural India, CNBC-TV18 Santiagora travelled to Madhya Pradesh to get a first-hand experience and look at the extent of crop damage and how farmers are coping.
It may look like it, but this white powder covering the roads is not snow. This is southeast Madhya Pradesh in the middle of March, and that white powder is hail. It's one of the reasons farmers in the region who grow wheat, gram and other pulses are struggling to make ends meet. Hachal Singh Mewada and his wife Leelabai Mewada from Chanderi village in MP's Sihor district blame these hailstorms for destroying almost their entire crop of wheat this year, putting even next year's livelihood in jeopardy.
आशा तो ये थी कि 20 क्विंटल से 25 क्विंटल 30 क्विंटल तक खींचना चाहिए, मगर अब आशा ये हो गई कि कुछ भी नहीं, आधी फसल नहीं हिटी।
तिहर की फसल नहीं हुई पूरी, 400 रुपया में इंतजार, छोरा हो कई गेहूँ काटे, ढोकरा ढोकरे से कई गेहूँ काटे, आड़ा पड़ गया, कमर दुखिया।
नहीं, फसल अगर नहीं गिरती जब तो हमें कोई बात नहीं थी, मगर फसल गिरने के बाद में अधिकारी उसको ये बोल रहे हैं कि वो तो कुछ नहीं हो।
70 kilometers away in Chopra village, Braj Mohan Rajput says he's in a tight spot. He had taken 3 acres of land on lease at a little over 1 lakh rupees per year. But his mixed crop of gram and wheat have failed, and he now has no choice but to borrow from money lenders at exorbitant rates to feed his family and clear his dues.
अभी तक कोई ना तो सर्वे वाले आए और ना कोई अभी तक जानकारी मिली हमें। ये चने का नुकसान तो हमारा पूरा ही हो गया, 3-3.5 कुंटल चनों में क्या होगा। अब पैसे देने पड़ेंगे अब सेठ कहीं से, 1,30,000 रुपये देना है।
Farmers across the state, from Bhopal to Mandsaur and Khargone, from Shahdol to Narmadapuram, Gwalior and Rewa, are in the same boat. It doesn't matter if they had sown wheat or gram or vegetables. They say the compensation they were promised last year has still not come, so hope that this year's promise will be kept soon is also dimming.
मैडम कोई वो आश्वासन नहीं, सरकार कह देती है कुछ नहीं मिलता है, मुआवजा ना मुआवजा मिलता है, ना तुषार का मिलता है, और ना कोई बीमा दे रहा है, कुछ नहीं दे रहा है।
कुछ नहीं दिया मैडम, वो मुआवजा मिलेगा मिलेगा, दिया ही नहीं।
But the state government says the promised 32,000 rupees per hectare of damaged crop will be paid as soon as surveys are done.
एक किसान का भी अगर ओले से फसल का नुकसान हुआ तो उसको भी दिया जाएगा। जितना भी क्षति हुई है उसकी पूर्ति हम करने वाले हैं इसी महीने।
सर कोई आंकड़ा है हमारे पास कि इतना इतने
हमने आंकड़े इकट्ठे कर रहे हैं, पूरा बुला रहे हैं, लेकिन जो भी नुकसान होता है हम उसको देंगे।
It's not just MP's farmers who are struggling. Farmers in states like Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan and Maharashtra have been hit hard by unseasonal rains. The damaged crops range from wheat and maize to onions, mustard and various vegetables and fruits.
Many state governments have assured farmers they will be compensated for the damaged crops. However, the compensation will start only after the surveys to examine the fields and estimate the damage is complete, and deadline set by states for this stage has already passed, and there's still a lot of backlog left. This will automatically mean compensation payouts will get delayed, which is not good news for farmers who had banked on this money to get the next harvest and sowing season going in June.
Experts say the harsher hits will come from failed wheat, maize and gram, which make up 85% of the area normally sown for the Rabi season. For farmers, the revenue loss is said to be staggering.
We've looked at if the rainfall hadn't happened, if the quality deterioration hadn't happened, what would have been the production and price of these crops, and what is it now given the unseasonal rainfall, and what is the delta between the two in terms of the revenue loss. And when we look at this for wheat, mustard, paddy, maize and gram for the Rabi season, and these account for 85% of Rabi's normal sown area, we see that the extent of revenue loss could be to the tune of around rupees 13,000 crores.
This has significant ramifications for the rest of the country as well. Not only will state governments have to pay out large amounts as compensation, hurting their fiscal situation, the resultant food shortage could mean another spike in food inflation. The big question is whether the government will consider hiking minimum support prices for the upcoming Kharif season to throw farmers a lifeline. In Bhopal, Santiagora.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Business Hour. Thank you for watching. News continues right here on CNBC-TV18.